Hello everyone, and welcome to the meeting of Gravesham Borough Council's Finance and Audit Committee on the 10th of February 2026. I intend to go through some housekeeping matters. This meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and recorded. The recording will be uploaded to YouTube within 2 working days, where it can be accessed by everyone. Members, please use the microphone in front of you when talking and ensure you turn your microphone off once you have finished speaking. Another member or officer will not be able to speak if you have your microphone on. Please note that the Council's visual equipment may, on some occasions, focus on or near to the public gallery area. Therefore, those in attendance at this meeting may be filmed or recorded. Attendance at this meeting signifies your agreement to this. If, as a member of the public, you do not wish to be filmed or recorded, please inform a council staff member in attendance and we will try to assist where reasonably possible. On hearing the fire alarm, we ask all attendees to immediately evacuate the building. Please evacuate via the nearest fire exits and make your way to the community square outside of the main reception doors. Perfect, thank you. Hello everyone. So I'm going to take us through the agenda, and we have number 2, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Gavin Larkins, David Beattie and Samir Jassal, with substitutions from Councillors Tony Rana and Dakota Dibben.
Thank you for those substituting today. Number 3, to sign the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 5th of November 2025. Can I get some green? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Sign those in a moment. So number 4, to declare any interest members may have in the items contained on this agenda. When declaring an interest, a member must state what their interest is. Do I have any? Nope. Great. Whizzing through this. Number 5, to consider whether any items in Part A of the agenda should be considered in private or items in Part B in public. I've not been informed of anything of such. No one else? Great. Then we have item 6, which is the 24-25 statements of account verbal update on audit progress. Jasmine.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This evening will be a brief verbal update on the external audit, which will be followed by the meeting coming up on the 25th of February, where we'll be presenting our audit findings report and our finalised auditor's annual report for 2024-25's audit. For this evening's verbal update, I would like to remind you of our audit plan that we took to September's Finance and Audit Committee meeting, where we were clear that at the outset of the 24-25 audit, our joint aim with management was clear. We wanted to rebuild assurance over the Council's financial statements and ensure that we had sufficient work performed over the in-year transactions and the closing balances of the Council. Whilst the opinion for the Council would always have been a disclaimed opinion due to the lack of assurance over the prior year opening balances, the planned outcome was for significant progress to be made so that the Council could begin to move forward from the disclaimers of the prior year. For this year, we would like to recognise that there has been significant progress, including completion of our audit work over payroll, pensions, MRP, and several other non-asset-based areas. And we would also like to formally thank the finance team for their continued support for what has been quite a challenging audit cycle. Their team have been constructive, engaged and committed despite competing pressures, and that is genuinely appreciated. However, despite these efforts, the audit has not achieved the planned outcome, and a substantial volume of the work across key areas has remained incomplete at the point of the statutory backstop. This is the date set by central government as the 27th of February 2026, for which we must provide our audit opinion over the financial statements. And the reason we will be providing the disclaimer of opinion over 24-25 is because there is insufficient time to complete the work required in line with the requirements set for this type of work. So the disclaimer of opinion will reflect inherent limitation arising from the unaudited opening balances and the fact that this planned audit procedures could not be completed in time for the date set by government. At the next meeting, we will also be taking our updated auditor's annual report. So this focuses on the value for money aspects of the authority, You may recall that at November's Finance and Audit Committee, we shared with you an interim auditor's annual report, but we held matters in respect to the financial statements audit until such work had been completed during the planned fieldwork timeline. We will be taking an updated auditor's annual report to the 25th of February's meeting, and this report will include an updated key recommendation in respect of the Council's arrangements for financial reporting and year-end close, in line with a significant weakness in those arrangements. Looking ahead, there is an expectation that the Council will show substantial improvement, and we are working alongside management to provide findings and recommendations that will help support them in this process. This will enable a greater portion of audit work to be completed in year for 25-26, and strengthening of the year-end process will be essential to rebuilding assurance and moving away from successive disclaimers. As I have alluded to through this verbal update, a full and detailed report presenting these findings, recommendations and next steps will be brought to you at the next meeting. Thank you. To take questions there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jasmine. Any questions, comments? Councillor Croxton.
Yes, can I try and just clear in my own mind, being a bear of little brain? You're telling me that we still will not have at the next meeting a complete set of the accounts which can be signed off for 2024, 2025. Is that right? And if so, what really are the problems we're facing?
Happy to add clarity on that one. So a completed version of the financial statements from management will be submitted as part of those papers. It is the audit opinion over those financial statements which will not be as planned in terms of regaining assurance on in-year and closing balances. And that was due to incomplete work across various scoped items, which are basically balances throughout those financial statements. What I have done, in line with the presentation that was taken to November's Finance and Audit Committee, is throughout the detailed report that will come in a couple of weeks' time, I have broken down every balance within the financial statements, detailed the work performed and measured that against the plan to make it very clear the reasons we were or were not able to meet the planned outcomes for each section. In many cases, this was due to incomplete evidence across our sample items for those balances. Hopefully that helps to answer your question in terms of the completeness aspect there, but I think perhaps management might recommend.
Thank you, Jasmine. Sarah, could you come in for me, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so Jasmine opened with the statement that the 24-25 statements would also always receive a disclaimed opinion, and that was true. I think that's been shared with the committee from the very start, purely because the auditors would not be able to do enough work in the time that they have to not only complete the in-year transactions, have certainty over those, but also be aware and have done enough checks and balances to make sure that the opening balances for the year were right. And that's effectively because we are building back assurance from 1920. And there's a lot of work that the auditors would need to do that. And that is an ongoing discussion at a number of levels. I think it's fair to say, Jasmine, in terms of how the auditors can do what they need to do against the current code of practice that they've got, which is quite rigid and explicit in terms of what they need to do. So I think that's the first thing to say, is that this was never going to be a clean bill of health in terms of the audit. There was always going to be a disclaimed opinion. Jasmine's right, due to a number of factors that I won't go into this evening, but members will be aware of. There has been challenges within the finance team, both in terms of capacity, resources, competing priorities. And whilst we absolutely set out with best endeavours to get this process done, that hasn't been possible. But again, happy to explore, perhaps as part of the audit report, what we are doing to respond to that, to make sure 25-26 is a more positive audit year. Thank you, Chair.
Lee, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, I understand it. I can see this going back to 2022 or whatever. Can I just try and see at what point do we draw a line, and what are the implications for the council of us not having a full set of accounts without disclaimers?
Happy to come in there. So the backstop date that I alluded to, the 27th of February 2026 for this year of financial statements, has in effect been a drawing of the line by central government. And this is, and there are many historic reasons as to why councils across the UK have ended up in such a position with their accounts, but to avoid having years worth of audits, so an audit that would take 1-2 years to complete to meet that high threshold of evidence that can be required, the backstop date was put in to draw that line and say, if you've not finished by this date for year end, you need to move on and start thinking ahead to next financial year. So this is really an opportunity for us to say, these are our findings and recommendations, and we'll come back fresh next year, so that you don't end up with an accumulation of financial periods under audit at the same time.
Very briefly. So this is the cut-off point. This is it. We're not going to be talking about disclaimers, and we'll be starting afresh at the next meeting.
Not quite the next meeting. Next meeting, I will be taking the detailed report. Apologies. But following the next meeting, we will come to you with a 25-26 audit plan, where we will look at management's response to our findings for 24-25, and we'll start thinking ahead to the audit procedures for the 25-26 period.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Croxon. Thank you, Jasmine. Any other questions, comments? No. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. Appreciate your time. That will take us on to the next item, which I believe is the Treasury Management Strategy and Capital Strategy for 2025-26.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council is required to produce 2 documents on an annual basis, the Treasury Management Strategy and the Capital Strategy. These documents set out how the Council will ensure that there's adequate cash available as and when is needed to operate a balanced budget, and how it intends to fund its capital programme. Due to the intrinsic links between these 2 documents, they're presented to members as appendices to one report. So the Treasury Strategy starts on page 23 of the agenda pack, and the Capital Strategy starts on page 55. So the Treasury Strategy follows the same format as previous years and is reflective of the requirements in SIPFA's Prudential and Treasury Management Codes. There have been no changes to those codes or regulation changes which affect the 26-27 strategy. The Council continues to use MUFG as its main Treasury advisors, and they have provided information on the prospects for interest rates and an economic update. The Council also engages Ireland Close to undertake specific Treasury-related activities, such as the completion of expected credit loss calculations. The Treasury Strategy is a forward-looking document and sets out the authority's strategy in terms of its management and annual investment programme for the forthcoming year, as well as the minimum revenue provision policy for the year. The document provides estimates of our capital prudential indicators, debt portfolio, Treasury indicators and affordability indicators for the forthcoming years up until 28 to 29. In section 4 of the report, starting on page 28, you'll see the estimates of the capital programme up until 28-29, along with the financing, based on the capital budget to be approved by full council on the 24th of February. The expenditure is split across 2 categories, non-HRA and HRA. In the second table on page 28, you'll see the net financing for the year. In 25-26, the net financing is estimated to be £30 million, and in 26-27, it's £12 million. That will be largely met from external borrowing, but the Council will utilise its cash balances in the short term to manage interest rate pressures. The net financing continues to be elevated in forthcoming years, which is reflective of the Council's capital programme, including schemes such as the new leisure centre and the new build and property acquisition programme within the HRA. Section 5 provides details of the Council's minimum revenue provision policy, which is the rate at which councils set aside money from revenue account to repay debt. The government issued updated regulations and guidance on MRP in 25-26, and the policy for 26-27 continues to reflect those updated regulations. In section 6, you'll see forecasts for external debt. As at the 31st of December 25, the gross debt for the council was 154 million. In tables on paragraph 4.4, members will see that we're forecasting that gross debt position remains below the capital financing requirement, which demonstrates the council has only borrowed for capital purposes and has not borrowed to support the revenue position. In section 7, details of the operational boundary and authorised limits have been set for the current and future years. To remind members, these are set by the council and there's no prescriptive way in which to calculate them. The operational boundary is the limit which we do not expect our borrowing to exceed. The limit can be breached in certain circumstances. However, the authorised limit is the limit beyond which our borrowing must not exceed. These limits have been reviewed in light of the capital programme and reflects our current position. Section 14 provides details of our ongoing affordability of capital plans and the various indicators, cost of finance against revenue streams. These aren't statutory indicators and have been included to provide members with an understanding of the revenue impacts of capital decisions. Sections 15, 16 and 17 set out the investment and creditworthiness policies for the year, along with various limits which must be adhered to when placing investments. There is only one minor change to the limits previously agreed. Page 38 sets out the limits from the maturity structures of fixed interest rate borrowing. Given that interest rates remain elevated and the continued advice from MUFG to keep borrowing short, the upper limit for debt under 12 months and 12 months to 2 years has been increased from 50% to 75%. Turning to the capital strategy on page 55, the council is required to produce a strategy to demonstrate how expenditure, financing and treasury management activity contributes to the provision of desired outcomes and take accountability, stewardship, value for money, prudence, sustainability and affordability. The strategy covers both the general fund and the housing revenue account. The purpose of this document is set out in paragraphs 2.2, which includes ensuring that the capital programme is realistic and affordable, investment decisions are prudent, capital plans support the council's priorities, governance and prioritisation processes are in place to plan and monitor, ongoing revenue cost implications are accounted for, and capital investments is directed to provide ongoing revenue savings. As well as having intrinsic links to the Treasury strategy, there are clear links between other strategic documents, including the corporate plan, the medium-term financial strategy, IT and digital strategies, and the climate change strategies. Happy to take any questions on those documents.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Do we have any questions from members? No? I just have one. On page 37, 14.3, it's about the HRA debt. So HRA debt is rising over the next couple of years, but here it's forecasting roughly the same number of homes. So just wanted clarification of whether we were planning to build more or not.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling to that page. Okay, so the HRA has got a very ambitious new build and acquisitions programme over the next few years. In the past, that's primarily been funded by external borrowing, along with the right to buy receipts that are generated from the sale of council houses. Recent changes to the discounts that are available to tenants have changed, which means our forecast for the sale of right to buy or council houses under that scheme is gradually reducing over the next few years, which means we'll have less right to buy income coming in, therefore placing a greater reliance on external borrowing. Hence the debt is going up at slightly higher, quicker rate than has previously been seen. Because of the nature of the schemes, over the next few years, there's around, I think it's about 400 homes being identified as being delivered through those new build and acquisition programmes. But it takes time for those plans to come to fruition, and some of the schemes are quite significant and will take a number of years on site. So whilst the number of properties within this period within the table doesn't change significantly, if we were to move to the next year, you would then start to see some of those schemes, actually those properties being delivered. So in 29-30, you'll see those number of properties going up, and in future years there'll be a higher number, which will again then bring that debt per dwelling down.
Great, thank you, Alex. Any other questions, comments? No, perfect, brilliant. That will then move us on to item 8, which is the internal audit progress update report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report at Appendix 2 is the third and final update on progress for 2025-26 before the annual report details the work of the team from the 1st of October to 31st of December 2025. Section 4 on page 79 of your pack shows how our resources have been used over the period and also details the impact on those resources. Full details of reviews that have been finalised since our last update to the committee and progress against the 25-26 plans can be found in the tables at section 5 starting on page 81. Now we have been trying to balance clearing the backlog from 24-25 while also making sure that current year activity doesn't fall behind. We now have only corporate debt recovery and homelessness from 24-25 to finalise, and we're on course to do this before the end of March. The tables starting at the bottom of page 84 detail the other assurance and consultancy activity that has been undertaken by internal audit. Section 6 identifies any common themes noted across the reviews finalised since the 1st of April. An update against the team's key performance indicators for this reporting period is provided at section 7 of the report, which starts on page 86. As of today, I can tell you that agreed assurance assignments delivered is now 44%. And currently underway is 22%. The section 8 on page 87 contains a request for amendment to the Q34 plan to remove 2 audits, one at the request of the client service and one to address our resource losses. Finally, section 9 of the report provides an update in relation to all agreed actions in the first table on page 88. The second table shows actions that are more than 6 months overdue or have failed to meet revised implementation dates, but you will see from the management update that progress is being made with both and they should be completed very soon. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Great, thank you, James. Any questions or comments from members? No? Okay, thank you, James. Right, moving on to item 9, which is the counter fraud update report. Back to yourself.
Thank you. Okay, yep. Likewise, the report Appendix 2 is the third and final update for counter fraud, covering the same period of 1st of October to 31st of December 2025. Section 3, commencing on page 96 of your pack, shows how the resources have been used over the period, detailing the level of time spent on each of the key areas outlined in the plan. The tables in section 4, commencing on page 98, provide an overview of the work undertaken in each of those areas. The table on page 99 shows a summary of results from external investigations and the associated savings, and there's also a brief summary of other counter fraud activity in the table on page 100. An update against the team's key performance indicators for the reporting period is provided at section 5 of the report, which is on page 101. Now, only 12 investigations were concluded in the reporting period with associated cashable savings of 6,921. Now, while the number of cases concluded is relatively low, this is due to the complex nature and ongoing actions associated with the cases that we're currently dealing with. The year-to-date position actually remains quite positive. That was all I was going to say by way of introduction. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Any comments, questions on that item? No? You got away with it, James. Great. Well, thank you so much. Then I will take us to item 10, which is the corporate risk register for 26-27.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report presents the outcomes of the annual risk identification and analysis exercise, the purpose of which is to help us as an authority identify what risks should be contained within the corporate risk register for 26-27. And this exercise is carried out parallel to the annual review of the Council's fraud risk register, which is later on the agenda this evening. So the risk management strategy of the authority is provided at Appendix 1 at page 109. And the new revised draft corporate risk register for 26-27 is attached at Appendix 2 at page 125 for members' information. A summary is provided within the main body of the report at paragraph 3.5 at page 105. And what that indicates is that having reviewed the risks for 26-27, we find ourselves in a position with 6 risks that have been assessed above our risk tolerance threshold, those being financial sustainability and resilience. So that is a slight shift in our risk profile from previous years, primarily because of the delivery of basic budget savings that have happened over the last decade and the outcome of the final settlement, which was confirmed yesterday. We have included local government reorganisation within the corporate risk register because it will be this year that those risks will start to materialise and certainly have an impact on us as an authority. We continue to recognise corporate risks around national and regional priorities and legislative change, alongside organisational capacity and resilience and cyber attack. And we have also included this year a risk around the adoption of and delivery of a sound local plan. At the last Finance and Audit Committee meeting, there was a suggestion that we should review the management of the capital programme as part of our risk analysis. That piece of work was done and is appended at Appendix 3 to this report, and that did assess that risk as being below the Council's strategic risk tolerance threshold, but that will continue to be monitored at an operational level. So this report is coming to the committee this evening for comments and approval by Finance and Audit before it is presented to Cabinet in March for adoption. Happy to take any questions the members may have, Chair.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Do you have any comments, questions? I don't have any either, but I would like to say that it's always important to do this, but it's great to only see that it's not become an enormous task and there's only 6 items, because once you start piling too many things on, it just gets out of hand. So that's really good to see. So we are approving this for recommendation, I believe. So can I seek approval from everyone? Agreed? Wonderful. Thank you. Brilliant. That's that done then. So taking us on to item 11, which is any other business, which by reason of special circumstance, the chair is of the opinion should be considered as a matter of urgency. I've not been informed of anything. Can't see anything else. Number 12, exclusion of the public. To move, if required, that pursuant to section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, that the public be excluded from any items included in Part B of the agenda, because it is likely in view of the nature of business to be transacted that if members of the public are present during those items, there would be disclosure of them exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. We do have a Part B item considered in private, which is the Corporate Fraud Risk Register. So I would like to say, in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the meeting will now become private in order for confidential information to be considered. Therefore, I will be formally closing the meeting to the public and press, as no further items will be discussed except for the confidential items listed on the agenda. Thank you to the public for joining this meeting. The public part of this meeting has been recorded and will be available to view via YouTube. I now formally close the meeting to members of the public.